a product manager's role? What do you do? And his answer was comical and yet true. He said, as a product manager, I'm more like a marriage counselor. My job is to just make sure everybody is together in the same room and they listen to everybody and all the problems will be solved. So I remember that. Um, Moving on. So let's get into the details of how this product management role itself came about. It's a fairly new concept in software development, actually. Once Agile and Scrum came into practice, that's when product management evolved. We had product management in other fields, like you would have marketing product managers where you would be managing a physical product. You had finance product managers as well, where you would be managing specific reports in finance. But in software development, this was a fairly new, it's still a fairly new concept. I would say about 10, 12, 15 years old at max. So what happens because of that is different companies will have different titles for product managers. You will hear titles like product analysts, product architect, product owners, product development managers, a lot of things. And not just the titles, but the roles and responsibilities of a product manager differ as well. Smaller companies will often have one title and will make you do work of multiple different roles where you wear different hats. Larger companies will be more specific and you might do even less work than what a usual product manager would do. A normal career path, ideally what it should look like is you start out as a product owner, then you become a product manager, and then you climb up the ladder to director of product management. There are times when there's a VP of product management in there as well, and then you go up to the C-level as chief product officer. My previous employer was one where this path was very religiously followed. We had all the proper steps and we followed this to the book. It rarely happens though, if you go in the outside world today, that hierarchy isn't followed or the titles aren't followed for sure. So in terms of the software development lifecycle, you'll see different versions of this SDLC as it is called online. It's represented in many different ways. This is one of my preferred ways to represent a lifecycle, where you have an initial planning phase. Once you're done with planning, you document the requirements. Once the requirements are done, you get into an analysis and a design phase where you design the solution. That's designing in terms of UI, UX from a user perspective, as well as the backend architecture perspective. Once that design is done, then implementation is when you actually start building the product. You test the product. That's where your QA team comes in. You evaluate, and then you go back to planning. That's the full cycle. Deployment obviously happens periodically as well. So this is one representation, like I said, and this is not representing any one form of development. There are different processes of software development that are followed. Scrum, Agile is one, Waterfall is one, Waterfall and Agile being the two extremes. The cycle still remains pretty much the same in all of them, but the time duration differs and the iteration pattern in Agile is what is unique and what is not there in Waterfall. So in Waterfall, you'll have this entire cycle done once and that's it. Whereas in Agile, you'll be constantly iterating, you'll be developing in small increments, you'll be deploying in small increments, and you'll keep doing the planning and evaluation phase over and over again. So from a product management perspective, you are heavily involved in the initial 3 steps of this, which is planning, requirements, and design part. That's where you are working with your stakeholders, your strategy team, your UX teams. You are the one making a lot of those decisions in terms of product features and product roadmap as well. And then in the backend part, you are still involved with your development team, but your involvement should ideally be lesser on the backend side than you are upfront in the project. Any questions on this slide before I move on? All right.
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just before the initial stage of the product, in the planning stage, do we have to look from top-down approach, then how the customers will take the product? No, just launching a beta version or something, or should we go for final kind of deliver a product?
No. So ideally, as a product manager, you are always thinking from a customer standpoint. You have to keep the customer's needs in mind and decide what will be the best for the customer. Now, when I say customer, it's either your end users or sometimes your stakeholders, but you have to have their needs in mind. It is up to the solutions architect or the development team to figure out how to achieve that goal in the best possible way. But your objective is to always have that top-down approach on what is best for my users, and I will give them that. Right. Any other questions? All right. So moving on into some more details of roles and responsibilities of a product manager. I have two sections here. I'm calling this one definitely. So this is definitely something that you should be doing as a product manager. That is, first of all, define a vision for the product. Your product vision is to explain everybody, including your stakeholders, your development team, your customers, your executive leadership, everybody. Your vision is to explain them what the goal is for this product. What is it that you are trying to achieve? Product visions are usually at a very high level and are usually within 3 to 4 statements. So that is definitely a responsibility, is define a vision for your product. Your second responsibility would be to work with your stakeholders. Like I was saying before, in the initial planning phase, you define a product MVP. Now, MVP is a term very commonly used or even abused in the industry these days, wherein we try and cut down on scope a lot just by saying this is not MVP. And so you often companies, some of the larger corporations, especially for example, Google, Facebook, Amazon, all these companies have shifted towards using the term MLP. So MVP is your minimum viable product. MLP is minimum lovable product. As a product manager, you want to make sure that your customers love the product they get. Viable product focuses more on the feasibility aspect of it, whereas lovable product again focuses more on the likeness by a customer perspective of it. So MVP is still like the textbook term that more often everybody uses, but a lot of companies are now shifting towards saying let's build on MLP, not MVP. But it is up to you to define that. You are in charge of defining what your MVP or MLP consists of. Business stakeholders will have a say in that, customers will have an opinion in that, but it's ultimately your responsibility. You are working with your strategy and UX teams to design the product. Again, if the company has a UX team, then they will be building the actual mock-ups of the product. You still have to approve those mock-ups. You still have to make sure those mock-ups match the requirements. You create a product roadmap. So when you have requirements, you then document those requirements and then you create a roadmap. When I say a roadmap, I'm talking, let's say, what will I be building 3 months later? That's on the roadmap. What will I be building 6 months later, 1 year later, even 3 years later? There are companies that have roadmaps up to the next 3 years. So when you have a list of requirements and you break them down into smaller chunks, as user stories as they are called, you need to then map out those on a roadmap and put those in a sequential form and usually broken down by feature. So we'll deliver this feature in the next release. We'll deliver this feature 3 months later and so on and so forth. But that is a product roadmap. All the tools that are generally used for backlog management will have a roadmap feature as well. Jira is one of the most popular tools by Atlassian company that almost all companies nowadays have adopted to. And Jira has a very good road mapping feature, so you can create stories and then put them in roadmaps as well. But if not Jira, all the other tools out there like Microsoft TFS has that feature, Azure DevOps has that feature as well. You are then defining the scope of the product as well as a manager, and then you are breaking that down by milestones. So milestones or releases, as you call them, you are basically defining which milestone will have what features and what's the scope within those features as well. I'll give you one example of the project I'm working on right now, which is for Cheesecake Factory. So just as an example, one of our milestones, one of our larger roadmap item is to create the entire e-com site. Within that, what we are saying is right now we'll provide an ability to use one credit card and one gift card for checkout. So that's the feature we are building on, is providing an ability to use credit cards and gift cards. Now that does not include being able to say add tips to your order or splitting my payment into multiple gift cards or multiple credit cards for that matter. All those are extra enhancements that we say, okay, in terms of roadmap, this will come next. So the next time we go to production, we'll have these features, but right now we won't have them. So that's how when you're defining your scope, you have to break that scope down by milestones. And then last but not the least, market and competitive analysis. You need to be aware of what your competitors in the field are doing. You need to be aware of how the market is behaving. For example, you need to be aware, again, I'll go back to the restaurant example, right? Cheesecake Factory's e-com business was barely about 5 to 7% of their overall revenue until 2 years ago. COVID happened. Now everybody wants to order online. That business skyrockets. Not just for Cheesecake Factory, but for a lot of most of the restaurants as well. Now there are restaurants, Cheesecake Factory in fact being one of them, that reacted very late to this. You need to be constantly aware of your surroundings. As a product manager, you need to be aware of what changes are happening, what your competitors are doing, and that would have a big impact on the roadmap that you have for your product and even the features. There are times when we learn from what competition is doing. I am a regular user of the Pizza Hut app. And I learned from that Pizza Hut app, hey, this is a cool feature. How come we don't provide this to our clients? So things like that. Questions? Okay. Moving on. These are some of the maybe rules and responsibilities that I have. And so maybe because like I was saying before, a lot of companies have different definitions of what a product manager does and doesn't do. And so if you're working in a smaller company wearing multiple hats, you might be writing your user stories and acceptance criteria on your own. Ideally, your company would have a product owner or a business analyst who will be doing that. But if not, that's something that could go on you as well. As a product manager, you might run sprint ceremonies like backlog grooming, sprint planning, the daily stand-ups, retrospectives. You might be doing that as well. Ideally, you would have a scrum master doing most of that role. But I know a lot of companies that don't have scrum masters. It's either the product manager or the product owner taking those responsibilities. You will be working closely with the dev team to resolve issues. Again, a smaller company, a smaller team, where you are heavily involved with the dev team on a regular basis as well. You will be reporting project status to the leadership team. Now, this is something that ideally a project manager would do. Having project manager and product manager both is not so common at all in this industry. So it is very likely that you'll be taking on a lot of project management responsibilities, this being just one of them. And the list goes on. I did not list everything here. We'll come across some of the other responsibilities later on in the presentation as well. But you could be shouldering a lot of those responsibilities as well, just depending on how the organization is structured in your company. Any questions here?
Yeah, hi. Actually, I'm having a question. So
Sure.
what is the role of a product owner here?
So ideally, a product owner is working at a step below a product manager, right? In two ways. One, a product manager is more involved at a higher level with the stakeholders in terms of strategy, in terms of planning, in terms of deciding on the features. The product owner will take those features and then break them down into user stories and acceptance criteria. Your product owner will still go to the business stakeholders, will still ask for those details, and they'll still ask questions from them. But they are not deciding the strategy or the roadmap for the product. That's a product manager's role. Product owner is working at one step below. So a product owner will be heavily involved with the development team. They'll be resolving any questions that they have. A product owner will be a part of all the Scrum ceremonies ideally. A product manager won't be there in every stand-up. He might not be there in any stand-ups actually. Backlog grooming is something that the product owner will do because he's writing those user stories and acceptance criteria. He'll be grooming those user stories with the team as well. So a product owner is looking at it at at that detailed level, whereas a product manager is working at one step above that and looking at features and epics, as we call them, and not at user story level.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. And we will get to the product owner versus product manager dilemma later on as well. So I'll share some more details at that time. A product design. So what does a product design entail? And this is one of the key deliverables as a product manager is you are responsible for the design. When I say responsible, as in you're not actually going into InVision or Figma or all these other tools and creating the mockups, or you're not deciding the backend architecture. But a product design is still something that is your purview. You make decisions on the product design and with inputs from your stakeholders, but you make those decisions. So it begins with a high level customer requirements. You understand from your users or your stakeholders as to what their needs are. You use your past experience. Of course, you already have the existing product knowledge, so you use that and you build a list of the high level requirements. When I say stakeholders here, stakeholders could be internal, it could be your executive team, it could be anybody from within the company, or it could be external. If you are working in a client facing company like I am, then you're talking about stakeholders on the client side as well. You can interview customers, market analysis plays into this, but all of those are inputs into your customer requirements. Once you have those high level requirements, then you would map out user journeys, process flow. So what would a user journey look like from one page to another or from one system to another? How would the process flows and the backend look like? How would the data flow amongst different systems? You would map out all of that. Creating mockups to define user experience. So if you have a UX team, they would create those mockups for you and you will be approving them. If not, you would create them as well. So again, goes back to one of those maybe job responsibilities is you are creating your own mockups as well. Then you would document user stories and acceptance criteria based on those high level requirements. If you have a product owner, great. The product owner will be doing that and you will be then just splitting those stories up into different features or different releases in Jira. Dependencies and priorities will come into play there once you get into details. You will have features that are dependent on each other. Back to my original example, if I don't have the ability to add one credit card, I cannot have a feature of splitting between different credit cards. So that's a clear dependency there. That dependency like that would help you also prioritize and put these features in a sequence and on a roadmap. And then the final part of the design is you would create a short and a long-term roadmap for the product, which would include all the major milestones or the major releases. So that's what a product design entails. Again, it's your deliverable, but you would be working with your stakeholders, your strategy team, your UX team, your product owners, all of them for this. And so that goes back to the original comment of being able to work with everybody and making sure everybody is on the same page. We product managers cannot do anything on our own. We would need inputs from pretty much everybody in the process. Moving on from design to resource planning. Resource planning is again one of those that you may or may not do depending on the size and the structure of the company. But resource planning happens at the beginning of the project. That happens in the planning phase itself. So we are talking mainly about people as resources here, but you would also need a resource plan for technology if there is a need for it. If there is a need for additional software for a particular project, you would need to plan and budget for that as well. If there is a need for hardware, if you need to buy new servers, you need to budget for that as well. So that's where resource planning comes into play. It is mostly done for people as resources though. So you are looking for developers, you are looking for QAs, you're looking for product owners, you're looking for project managers, and a lot of other folks that are necessary for a project to go through. So when you are deciding on what resources you need, you are looking at the needs of the project or the product and the skill set of the people that are available within the company. More often than not, you will be staffing or resourcing from within the company itself. There will be occasions on a larger project specifically where you go to your manager and say, hey, we need to hire more people for this, or hey, we need to get some contractors on board. So all of that comes into play when we are doing resource planning. If you're taking people from within the company, make sure you account for what their current needs are, what their available capacity is. I, for example, on my team have developers who are working with 3 different clients. So I do not get full 40 hours of each person working just for Cheesecake Factory. They are working with other clients as well, and I only get a certain capacity of those. So there is a master resource planning spreadsheet, which has hours available by team member, by skill set every week, and we keep tracking towards that. So that's that number 2 bullet there is documenting the detailed resource plan. But you need to basically determine how much effort is needed, so how many people are needed, and for how long will they be needed. Obviously, this is just for the MVP or the MLP phase. Any enhancements beyond that, you can have a separate resource plan for each of those releases. You would make updates to the resource plan as and when needed. Things happen, emergencies come up, somebody suddenly isn't available, or project needs changed. Suddenly we don't need one big feature, or we push the timeline out. We needed to do 2 more things that we didn't account for. So all of those things can happen. You have to make sure you keep the resource plan updated. The goals of effective resource planning are: 1, maximize the work done with optimum capacity. So you want to obviously a standard term that says maximize output with minimum input. That's what this is. You want to have optimum work done and optimum resources used. Efficiency without impacting quality. Again, I don't need to elaborate on that. You are basically looking for efficient work, but not compromising on quality at all. Do not focus on quantity. Again, as a product manager, keep that customer need in mind, keep the quality in mind. Avoid team member burnouts. This is very important because we often tend to forget that developers, QAs, they are all still humans. Don't expect them to work 10, 12 hours a day for you. Don't burn out team members. If you think it's not feasible, get more resources on the project from the beginning. Or if the timeline is too much of a stretch, communicate that out to your stakeholders that that timeline is not possible. But let's avoid team member burnouts and at the same time increase job satisfaction, right? So if you're going to avoid burnouts, you're going to increase job satisfaction and also retention of team members. You don't want to see people start quitting soon. And also improve relationship with your clients. So if resource planning is done effectively, that means you're able to meet the original timelines, then that would improve relationship with your clients as well, with your stakeholders as well. Any questions on this?
Yeah, I have one question, Setu. So, what should we do if the requirements change halfway through the sprint? Like, how do we allocate resources, or like, how do we go about it?
So That is something that happens very frequently, and it's pretty common for the requirements to change. In fact, that's one of the basic principles of Agile is to be open to change. So the first and foremost thing is you don't say no to change, but it's on a case by case basis. You evaluate what the change is and how much of an impact will it have. For example, if it's a big requirement that has suddenly come in, and that's going to need a lot more development capacity, then one, you evaluate whether it's really necessary to do it now, or can this wait until the next sprint, or can we do this later in the next release even. So you go back to your stakeholder or your customer or your client and talk to them and say, hey, is it even necessary right now? And there are times when it is. You have to do it. Great. So then you go back to your development team and figure out how can we accommodate this big change. The team says there is no way we can accommodate with our current capacity. We need to get more people on board. Then that's the point when you go ahead and start looking for extra resources, extra hands to help out. You would ideally staff more people if available, or you would talk to your team members and say, okay, let's maybe push the sprint by 2 days. Can we get this done that way? So it's all about communication, making sure everybody's on the same page, and on a case by case basis, you decide what the action is to be taken. I have seen though more often than not, if we don't have capacity for it, clients usually will be okay with one of the two things. Either one, we don't need it right away, but let's put this in for the next sprint or the next release. Or two, this is a must have, we have to do this. It's okay if we release 3 days later. So usually you'll find that's either of those two scenarios, but if not, then you will have to go about and look for more resources to get that done.
Okay, so is it a good practice to like freeze a sprint and start working in a new environment? Or is that considered as a waste of resources?
Freezing a sprint midway?
Yes.
Yeah, that is not a good practice. That is not recommended. That definitely, I wouldn't say a waste of resources, but all the effort done until that point in that sprint is then underutilized. So it's definitely not recommended to freeze a sprint once you are already into the sprint itself.
Yeah, that was one of my interview question for a product analyst role. So I just thought I'll check with you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Moving on, risk analysis and mitigation. Another very important step as a product manager is to analyze risk and how can we avoid risk, or if it's not avoidable, what do we do if that situation actually happens? So what is risk analysis? The question we were talking about, requirements coming up in the middle of a sprint. That is an example of a risk. It's often noted down as a risk when you have previous experience with, say, that client or that stakeholder, and you know that they have a tendency to do this often. You would flag that as a risk. But there can be different types of risks. There can be technical dependencies which are flagged as a risk to a project. There can be dependencies on an external system or an external third-party vendor, which becomes a risk. Different types of risks are possible. So the way you go about it is, number one, you need to identify a list of people that need to be aware of all the risks and their mitigation strategies. You need to identify what the process would be for risk planning. Ideally, you as a product manager are leading that. So you would have weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings with the group and say, here is a list of our risks right now. And here is what we plan to do if any of these situations actually manifest. Once you do have a risk, you have to identify what has happened or it can happen, and if it does happen, what to do. So that's the step 2 of that, is identification of a risk. I'll give you another example from my previous role at a home security company. It's called Brinks Home Security. So one of the risks that we identified much later into the project while we were doing UAT for that project. In fact, about a month before our go live, was that during our testing, we found out that a vendor that we were dependent on often had blackout periods. And we were not able to test, not even test, our systems would not function because they had blackouts. And this happened way too often than usual. It happened almost like once every 2 days or 3 days. So that's a risk that came up so late in the project. So in cases like that, what we usually do is you wouldn't wait for your weekly or a bi-weekly meeting. You would raise a flag right away, set up a meeting right away and communicate to everybody. Here is what is happening. What can we do about it? Okay. For a technical dependency like that, a technical risk like that, we go to our dev team or our solutions architect and we ask them, this is what we see is happening. What can we do to mitigate this risk? We don't want our systems to be down. That will be a very bad user experience. What can we do? Can we put say a placeholder page that doesn't actually do any API calls or pull data in the background, but at least the user sees that as a web page, just as an example. But what can we do? So that's the analysis part of it, is you figure out what to do in that situation. You also figure out how likely is something to happen. A risk like somebody raising requirements in the middle of a sprint is not a technical risk. It's more of a business or a process risk. But how likely is that to happen? In some cases, it will be very likely to happen. In some cases, it's not so likely. It's a low risk at that point. And then the last step of the process is monitoring. You keep monitoring your log of risks. You make sure none of those are actually manifesting. And if they are, then make sure you are taking the right steps to mitigate those risks. But in this entire process, talking about risk analysis and mitigation, communication is the key. Everybody, your stakeholders, your executives, your client, your customers, your dev team, everybody has to be aware and everybody has to be on the same page. They don't have to attend your weekly meetings, but they have to be aware of what is going on. And if a big red flag happens within the product or a project, then everybody has to be made aware right away, be it an email, be it a Slack message, be it a Teams message. You have to inform everybody. So communication is the most important part, and effective communication will most likely save your project from any and all risks, as long as you are, like I said, communicating effectively. So you're talking to the right people at the right time. Right time being the key there as well. Communicating too late might be of no help. You have to ask the questions at the right time. Questions on this? All right, so moving on. What are some of the essential soft skills in order to be a good product manager, an effective product manager? I've said communication a lot of times in this presentation already, so that's obviously number one there, communication. And when I say communication, I don't mean just talking, but communication, some key elements of communication are listening. You have to be a very effective listener. Listen to your stakeholders. When they're giving you requirements, read between the lines, understand what those needs are. That's still communication. Being able to translate those needs into technical requirements, or vice versa, being able to translate what your development team is saying in terms of feasibility and take that back to your stakeholders in a language that they understand. So all of that forms a part of communication, and that is one of the very important soft skill in order to be an effective product manager. Empathy. I had said in the beginning of this presentation, you have to have customer needs in mind. You can only do that if you can relate to what your customers want. So empathy is another very important skill. You have to be able to empathize with your customers, understand their needs, and then only you can give them a product that will best fit their needs. Also empathy towards your dev team. You have to understand their challenges as well. At times you have to understand their pain points as well. We have to have the customer needs in mind, but we cannot be blindsided by what the dev team needs as well. Decision making, you will have to make some tough decisions in terms of scope, in terms of features, in terms of UI, UX, strategy as well. So you have to be able to make firm decisions, informed decisions. You have a lot of people to talk to in the company, but there'll be times when it is finally your authority, your decision making. And so you have to be able to make those tough decisions. The fourth one is my favorite, is the art of saying no. A lot of us find it very difficult to say no to something. In fact, when I started out as a business analyst, I said yes to everything. When I would go to my stakeholders and ask for requirements, they would give me a long list of 15, 20 things for a one small feature, and I would say yes to all of it. All I would do is, yes, yes, we can do it, we can do it. I would write it down and give it to the dev team saying, let's do this. Over the years, I've learned that there are times when you have to say no. You have to be nice, be polite, but still be able to say no. And when you say no, give them a reason why. I've learned that every time you give somebody a reason and explanation, more often than not, they will understand and they'll agree with you. There are times when you say, no, we cannot do this right now. Let's do it in the next release. There are times when you have to say, no, this is not even feasible. But you say, technically, it's not feasible, but instead of this, what if we do this? So you propose an alternative solution. You have to be able to say no. So that is my favorite soft skill in the 5 here. And then time management. Be able to balance your time. Like I was saying before, as a product manager, you are more heavily involved in the beginning of a project than at the back end. So balance your time that way. You might be working on multiple projects. You might be working with multiple clients as well. So you have to manage your time effectively there as well. The time that you give to different features. At the beginning of the project, when you're working, you are supposed to be focusing more of your time on the MVP or the MLP. Do not give more time to features that are going to happen 2 years later. So time management is the fifth soft skill that I have found to be very important in being an effective product manager. Questions on soft skills? Okay, so let's go on to the technical skills. Some of the technical skills that you need as a product manager, I'll clarify, you do not need to be able to write code. You do not need to know Postman and write automated testing scripts to be a product manager. But what you do need is some of these. You need to be able to analyze data for your own analysis purposes. You don't need to be a champion at SQL and write complex queries, but be able to pull data, right? Normal select queries and pull data for your analysis purposes. Data analysis will be very important when you are studying the market, when you are studying your own company's sales data, for example. So at that point, you need to know some data analysis. You don't need to be a Tableau expert, for example, but you should be able to read Tableau reports and Tableau charts. Problem solving. You will have to be very creative in problem solving, especially when it comes to your customers' problems. Oftentimes, your customer will describe you a solution. You have to say, let's move the solution aside, tell me what the problem is. And then you take that problem and you provide creative solutions to that. You will also have to resolve blocks for your dev team, for example. The problem solving will come in there as well. Risk mitigation, we already spoke about before. That's one of the essential technical skills there. UX, UI skills. You do not need to create mockups. In most cases, companies do have UX specific resources that will do that. But if you do, then you have to learn those tools. InVision, Figma are some of the popular UX, UI tools that are used. But you will still be participating with the UX team in design reviews. So you will still be you would still need to read UX, and you'll still have to visualize that user flow from the customer's needs standpoint and match that with your requirements. You will still need to understand what the as is or what it looks like today versus what it will look like in the future. And then backlog management. Spoken a lot about that before as well. You create the backlog, manage the backlog, and then you create the roadmap as well. Jira is one of the most popular tools adopted for backlog management these days. So that's another tool that you guys can keep in mind. Questions on technical skills? No.
I'm having one question. So, like, how data analysis helps in creating the planning? Is there any example?
Absolutely. So as an example, you're analyzing your company's sales data. Your company's sales data will probably give you some demographics on what does your customer base look like. And that definition of customer base will probably let me take a random example. Let's say most of your customers are from the state of Texas. So now you know that your customers are mainly from Texas. So when you're designing your product, you can keep that regional feature in mind. Or let's say you get maximum sales in the months of December to February. So that's the winter time frame. So when you are designing now your product or you're designing your UX UI, you can keep that time frame in mind. If you find out that most of your customers are women between a certain age range, then that plays into how you design your product as well. So all of that, depending on what the data tells you, you can take that as an input into your design and your strategy for the product.
Okay. So will we like communicate the same with the stakeholders regarding the output?
Absolutely. Whatever data tells you, that is information that you can share with your stakeholders. In fact, you will have to share because you will be asked questions on why this design. If you have a pink colored button on your web page, why this pink color? You have to back it up with answers. So at times that answer will be in the data that you analyzed. So you can definitely share that with your stakeholders or even with the executive team.
Okay. Yeah.
It is usually not shared with end users, as in customers, because customers are not given that back-end information. But if you're working with a client, Cheesecake in my example, the Cheesecake management is somebody that I can share that information with.
Okay.
Right.
I have one question.
Sure.
So when it comes to UX or UI skills and visualization, so do you mean that is data visualization or the UI of the website or the product?
UI visualization specifically. So oftentimes what will happen is when you are in the strategy or the planning phase, you're not creating the actual mock-ups of the website, let's say in a tool, but you are just drawing on a whiteboard. You have a chalk in your hand and you're drawing on the whiteboard of what we think the user experience would look like. It will be you, let's say the client, let's say your strategy team members, they'll all be in a room and you will be leading that meeting. So you'll have to show them, here is what I think our client experience would look like. They would go from one screen to another, third. These are the 3 screens and here are the buttons, here are the fields on it. So if you cannot visualize that, then you will not be able to succeed at doing that part of the process.
So this is specific to digital products, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so talking about UX and UI, I have another image that I love very much, and it shows a good difference between what is UI and what is UX. What is user interface UI versus user experience UX. They can be very different. And that is why it is very important to keep both of them in mind. You don't keep just one or the other, but you have to keep both of them in mind. Moving on, we spoke about product owner role before. I have business analyst here, but a product owner role is very similar to business analyst, especially when the business analyst is not a technical one on the back end side, but more on business facing. Business analysts can be technical business analysts as well, as in they are working purely on the back end requirements. They are just focusing on the architecture and the design of the solution. Here for this particular slide, I'm assuming that the BA is more business facing, more customer facing. So here are some differences of what a product manager would do versus what a business analyst would do. In terms of just a basic job description, as a product manager, you would be overseeing all the aspects of the product, including the vision, the roadmap, execution. We spoke about that. Whereas as a BA, you are at a level below, you're documenting those detailed requirements, business requirements, technical requirements, you're writing the user stories, acceptance criteria, all of that. Product owner, a product manager, is responsible for the functional requirements at an initiative and an epic level. So initiative, think of it like a project, and that's a Jira term. Jira calls it initiative, but think of it as a project. So you'll have projects and epics for a product manager versus user stories and acceptance criteria for a business analyst. The artifacts, the documents that you produce as a product manager would be a vision, a roadmap, and a scope document. Whereas a BA is responsible for artifacts like user stories, acceptance criteria. A product manager, again, is more outward facing, spends more time working with stakeholders, works at one level above, so he's spending more time in strategy and design. Whereas a BA is more inward facing, so he's spending more time working with the development team, working with the QA folks and clearing their doubts. How do you define success? So for a product manager, customer delight, again, a word that I like a lot. Customer satisfaction is an abused term these days. We have to go a step beyond just satisfaction. We don't need to just satisfy the customer. We are looking for customer delight here. When they use your tool, when they use, say, your website, they have to be thrilled with that product. So that's customer delight there. Increased engagement rate. So if it's a website, we are seeing more and more users on the website now. They keep browsing through the page. They don't go away so quickly as before. So that's increased engagement rate. And that's the success criteria for being an effective product manager. Whereas for a business analyst or a business analyst, your success criteria is defined by a defect-free solution. You didn't create too much tech debt. Your requirements were effective. So when we had a solution, we didn't have defects. That's how we defined the success of a business analyst. And along very similar lines, a product manager versus a project manager. Now, this is something that is very rarely followed, unfortunately, today. These two roles are the most overlapped or most mixed roles in organizations, where you'll have one or the other, and that person's doing all of it. In my current organization, that's not the case. We have project managers and we have product managers as well. So what's the difference between the two? As a project manager, you are overseeing aspects of the project like timeline, resources, budget. That's what you are responsible for. A product manager is responsible for, like we said before, the vision of the product, roadmap, and execution of it. So as a product manager, you decide what needs to be built and why it needs to be built. So the reason behind it and what that product is. Whereas a project manager would define who will build it and by when will they build it. So resources and timeline is what is a project manager owning. Artifacts. For a product manager, we already talked about. For a project manager, the artifacts are the project plan, a resource map, project status reports to your executive team. All of those are the artifacts that a project manager produces. Day-to-day tasks, as a product manager, we've spoken about a lot. I have a few here. You will be doing competitive analysis, design, solution discussions. You will be prioritizing between features. Whereas a project manager will be planning for KPIs, that is key performance index. They'll be allocating resources, you'll be defining the budget. And success criteria for a project manager, if the project meets the budget and timeline of the original scope, especially of the MVP, then we say that's a success for the project manager. For the product manager, again, it's customer delight and increased engagement rate. Any questions on this one?
I have one, maybe not at the right chart, but so who manages the budget for your particular product? The product manager or the project manager?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Who manages the budget for the particular sprint or whatever activity it's going on?
Yeah, that would be a project manager. Anytime we talk about budgets and dollars, it's a project manager is responsible for that. All right, any other questions? No? Okay. Well, that's all the slides I had for you guys today. I have one more which lists some useful resources for you. A couple of books that I recommend. The first one is, although the title is Cracking the PM Interview, I think that book gives great insights on, in general, what a PM role looks like in the real world. So I strongly recommend that book, even though you are not interviewing currently. Although that book is very widely used for interviews in these large IT organizations, Facebook, Google being prime examples. People read that book even before the interview process starts. And then second is by Matt Lemay, Product Management in Practice. Again, both of these books go more into detail of what the real world product management looks like and not what ideally it should be. So I recommend those two books strongly if you're interested to pursue a career in product management. Some trainings I have already told you guys about the product owner training, certified Scrum product owner. If you guys are interested in UX UI trainings, something that you want to pursue further, then Interaction Design Foundation is an organization that has lots of trainings at different levels. That's their website there. And their training starts from entry level all the way to pro level, and it's actually fairly inexpensive as well. Their trainings, you get like a 1-year membership, and then once you pay for the membership, all the trainings are included in that. So I think especially if you're just full-time students right now, I think that training would make a lot of sense to do, and you would learn a lot of stuff about UX UI on that. And then lastly, I have my contact information here. If you guys want to reach out to me anytime you have questions, if you guys are working as a product manager and you need some guidance, feel free to reach out to me. If you are looking for mentorship opportunities, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always available. That's my email, phone number, and LinkedIn there. And if you have any further questions on the session right now as well, I'm happy to answer those.
So you, at the start of the presentation, you described a path that took you from business analyst into a product management role. Is there a different path that people pursue to get to a product manager's role if they're already working professionals?
Yes. So when I started out, product management was so new that I hadn't even heard of that title. So that was my path. These days, I think the more common path or the likelier path that you would take is you would start out as a product owner and then get into product management. So you start out with that product mindset itself from the beginning. There are multiple other paths though, depending on the company you're in or you're applying for. The hierarchy is so different in different companies that it's hard to have one common path. But at the gist of it, the heart of it, you start out as a product owner, which means you are focused on the product, but you start out working with the details, and then you get more and more involved into the strategy and into the planning phase. So you keep climbing up the ladder from a work perspective and then from a career perspective as well.
Setu, we have a few questions in the chat window as well. Do you want me to read that out?
Yes, please. I have my slideshow up, so yeah, if you can read those chat questions, that would be great.
Sure, I'll do that. So Lakshmi Monica asks, how is a digital product manager different from product managers in other industries? Will there be any skill set difference in terms of technologies, or is it only the PM attitude?
So Are they different in different industries? Definitely yes. I'm working on the digital side right now, but I worked as a product management on an internal application before. So it was not even a web product. It was just an in-house custom app that we had developed. And so I wouldn't call myself a digital product manager at that time. However, my skill sets are still the same. I still have the customer's needs in my mind when I'm working on the design of the product. We still had UX teams defining what those screen mockups would look like. Talking about product managers working purely on the backend, as in on the data analysis side, on the API side, that is not so common, or at least they're not titled as product managers anymore. Because if you are a product manager, you basically have a product that a customer is using, and so it has to have a front face on it. If it doesn't have that face on it, then you probably are not a product manager anymore. What do they are usually called? I mean, there are architects, there are developers, there are different titles. But don't quote me on this. I won't be surprised if companies are using the product manager title for that work as well. Like I said, the product management itself is such a new concept that not everybody follows the same guidelines on it. And so you will find differences depending on the company. I hope I answered the question there.
Great. I believe so. I hope Monica is satisfied with the answer. Moving on, we have
Yes.
Sachin.
Yes, Amlan.
Great.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have Sachin asking, does product manager role differ from big to small companies? Say big companies where end users are customers.
Yes. So usually in larger organizations, there'll be a much bigger headcount. So you will have fewer responsibilities. Your work will be less visible as well. In a smaller organization, because there are less number of people, you are doing much more work. You are wearing multiple hats. Like I was saying before, in a smaller company, you will be the product owner. You will be the project manager as well. You'll be doing a lot more things, but your work will have that much more visibility as well. So I was working at JP Morgan Chase before this. They have about 250,000 employees across the globe, or actually 300,000 now. So in a company that big, what I did, my boss knew, but nobody above that knew, or my team knew, and obviously the business that we worked with knew, but none of the other business units knew. In my current company, the work that I am doing, our CEO knows as well, because it's a 200 people organization. So that's the difference. Wearing multiple hats, doing more than one role, but at the same time, you get that visibility. There is that much more responsibility on you as well if you are working in a smaller organization. In a larger organization, you have fewer responsibilities, so a lesser risk as well, because somebody will cover up if you make a mistake.
Great. I think Santosh has added on to the previous question in asking what's the difference in a PM role between B2B and B2C companies?
So a B2B versus a B2C, again, it's not as black and white as it sounds. Again, as an example, I'm building an e-com platform for Cheesecake Factory right now. Would you term that as a B2B or a B2C? Because technically I'm still working for Cheesecake Factory. I'm only meeting their stakeholders. I'm not directly going to the clients. And Cheesecake Factory, let's say, builds their own website directly to the customers. That becomes B2C. Although what I do impacts their customers directly. So it's not black and white, first of all, there. And from a product management perspective, things do not change much. Yes, one thing does change is your analysis part. Because you are working in a B2B company, you have a smaller group of stakeholders to work with. I work with the Cheesecake Factory team, which has about, say, 4 or 5 people in the leadership team. I only have to talk to them. If I'm directly working in a B2C company, so let's say I have my own website that people go to and buy products from, let's take Amazon as an example. It is harder for me to get feedback from actual customers. So now my process of analysis changes. I need to do focus groups to get feedback from those people. I need to do interviews. I need to do surveys to get feedback. I need to have crawlers on the website to understand their behavior. Whereas in a B2B company, you probably are relying on a smaller group of people for your analysis phase. But other than that, the artifacts that you produce or your day-to-day doesn't change much.
Got it.
Thanks. Thanks, Ed.
Right. So moving on to the next question, we have, do you follow a particular framework to prioritize product backlog?
There are plenty out there. Honestly, I do not follow a particular framework because it often one framework doesn't fit every time. So I usually just play by the ear. I look at what my features are. I understand what the customer priorities are. And then I prioritize the feature first. And then within that feature, it becomes much simpler to prioritize user stories. Oftentimes, user stories prioritization will be handled with the help of the dev team as well, because they will have technical dependencies to build certain stories first. So I am more focused on prioritizing features and what's important to my customers first. No specific technique really that needs to be followed. Just like I said, understand the needs of the customer, discuss those priorities with your strategy team and your clients, and just go with that flow.
Great. Thank you, Setu. We have one more question. And what skills we need to start as a PM intern? What companies look for in an intern?
Skills I already highlighted. I would say focus on the soft skills. Starting out as an intern, companies will not expect you to have a super high skill set. So the soft skills are more important at that point than the technical skills as an intern. And that not even as an intern, I would say even later on, that implies where soft skills are way more important than your technical skills, because technical skills can be learned, can be taught. Companies will often teach you Jira. They'll teach you InVision if you don't know how to do it, but they cannot teach you communication. That's something you have to know. They cannot teach you how to say no. That's something you have to know. So soft skills are important. And then companies that look for interns, it's not so common, especially as product management interns. It is not so common, unfortunately, but there will be different titles that you'll see out there. You will see business analyst interns. You might be doing the same work, but just a different title. And even as an intern, they'll look for what field of study you are in. Because I come from an engineering background, a mechanical engineering background. But as a mechanical engineer, if I had applied for a PM intern role, I wouldn't have qualified. So companies will look for that. But ideally, look for, if you're looking for internships, feel free to reach out to me offline or later on as well. I know some specific companies, well, all the larger organizations definitely will look for interns. But I'm talking, not everybody will be able to get into Google and Facebook. I wish you all do, but just being real and practical, not everybody gets in there. So in terms of usual companies, the little smaller companies than that, feel free to get in touch with me later on. I can point you in the right direction. I can get you in touch with a couple of folks I know who do look for interns. Not too many interns, maybe one or two interns here and there, but I can try and put you in touch with them.
Great, Setu. I think that'll be wonderful. On similar lines, we have one more question from Rucha. How to prepare for PM intern interviews? What are the common questions to expect?
I never worked as a PM intern, so it's hard for me to answer what questions to expect. But as an intern, as a PM intern in general, I'll tag along on my previous answer is focus on your soft skills, expect behavioral questions a lot more. Behavioral questions as an example, if you are presented with a particular situation and you are the product manager in that situation, how will you do it? Let's say you are working on a requirement with stakeholders and there are two stakeholders who have conflicting opinions. How will you handle that situation? That's a classic example of a behavioral question. So look up on Google behavioral questions for an interview and you'll get a long list of websites. Focus on behavioral questions a lot. Especially as interns, I have had interns in the past and that's all we focus on when we are looking for interns is a person fit. We are not looking for technical fit. We are looking to make sure you will fit in the culture of the company. And that's why those behavioral questions come into play. If we think you'll fit in the culture, then you are hired. I hope
Great.
that answers the question.
I definitely believe so. We have one more question from Santosh, which states, now that ERP systems have automated the resource planning stage, what portion of this activity actually constitutes a PM's role?
So, yeah, that automation is only to a certain extent. The ERT automation, it's not fully automated yet, and it's not implemented across all organizations by any means. And it's still fairly raw, fairly in early stages right now. And so a lot of the responsibilities would still fall on the product or the project manager, however the company has it structured. If your if your company does have that system, it's still your job to feed into that system, feed in information on the requirements, feed in information on the skill sets, and then monitor that to make sure it's tracking accurately. If things change, it's up to you to make those changes. Let's say you need additional resources or you need less resources. That's still your job or your role to feed that into ERT and make sure that gets updated. So if your company has it, great. That's good news. But again, not all companies have implemented that yet.
Great. I think that covers all the questions in the chat. Does anyone have anything else to ask to Setu? Feel free to just unmute yourself and speak up. Yeah, I think everyone is pretty much done with all the questions today. All right. Thanks everyone for attending another session with the product base, and thank you Setu again for taking the time to come out and join us today.
Sure.
To all our members, we'd again be reaching out to you with information and registration link for the next event, which is on the 16th of November. Do look out for the email in your inbox, and we will see you all soon. Thank you again, Setu. Thanks a lot for taking out the time today. It was a really lovely session.
Thank you. I hope this was useful to some of you at least. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any further questions.
Absolutely. I know for sure that I'm going to reach out to you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, Setu. Bye.
Thank you.